You can either live past the expiration date or you can grow. That's it. Those are the only two options. There's no third one where you stay exactly who you are and keep getting the same results forever. That's not how people work. That's not how businesses work. That's not really how anything works. Every version of you has an expiration date. The skills that got you here, the approach that built what you've built, the way that you operate when things are working, at some point, it stops being enough. And when that moment comes, you can either hold on and keep telling yourself that it's still working, that you just need to try a little bit harder, that the results will come back, or you build the next version. Most people hold on for too long. I have always evolved. I don't have a dramatic reinvention story. I just never got comfortable enough in any version of myself to stop moving. And looking back, when I think about the thing that kept me growing more than anything else, it was the refusal to mistake consistency for stagnation. The understanding that being loyal to a version of yourself that has expired is not discipline. It's fear dressed up as dedication. Kobe Bryant understood this better than almost anyone who ever played the game. This is episode 6 of the Mamba Mentality series, and this one is about adaptability, about what it actually looks like to build the next version of yourself before the current one runs out. When Kobe was just 18 years old and had just entered the NBA, his neuromuscular therapist gave him a birthday gift. They were tap shoes. He told Kobe about the Nicholas brothers, who were two legendary tap dancers from Philadelphia. And he explained to him that tap dancing was one of the best ways to develop ankle strength and footwork that would translate directly to basketball. Kobe didn't laugh. He didn't really question him much. He just started taking lessons. I want you to stop and think about that for a second. An 18-year-old NBA player, already talented enough to skip college entirely, taking tap dancing lessons because someone told him it would build the footwork he'd need later in his career. He wasn't just thinking about who he was at 18. He was already building who he'd need to be at 35. That's what adaptability looks like before you need it. It isn't just responding to change after it arrives. It's preparing for it while everything is still working. Building the next version while the current one is still at its peak. Because by the time the ankle injuries came, by the time his Achilles tore, by the time his explosiveness faded, and the first version of Kobe Bryant started expiring, the footwork was already there, waiting years in the making. When Kobe came back from the Achilles tear and started preparing for his final seasons, he did not study Michael Jordan. He didn't go back to the players who had shaped his game for 20 years. He studied Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce was 36. His athleticism was mostly gone. What he had left was craft. Head fakes, footwork, patience, the ability to get his shot off against younger defenders through tough angles and timing instead of speed. Kobe told his friends that Pierce was the player he was analyzing, how he created space without jumping over anyone, how he had made the transition from athlete to craftsman without ever looking like he was going backwards. He said something about his own situation that I think is worth sitting with. There were certain things his body couldn't do anymore, and you have to figure out what those are. He said that's a very hard conversation to have. But then he also said, just because something evolves doesn't make it any less than what it was before. That's someone who decided how they're going to tell the story. That it's not a story of decline, but it's actually evolution. And the first version was one thing, and the second version is something completely different. And different does not mean lesser. April 13th, 2016. Kobe's last game. He was 37. His Achilles had already been torn and repaired. His knee had been fractured. His rotator cuff had been torn. He had played more NBA minutes than almost any guard who ever lived. He scored 60 points against the Utah Jazz, the same team that watched him airball 4 shots in 1997 as an 18-year-old rookie. He was not the same player at 37 that he was at 24. Nobody expected him to be. What nobody expected was for him to score 60 points in his final game on a body that had been through just about everything. The Ringer wrote about it simply. He was the rare great athlete who didn't rely on his athleticism to dominate. That's why at 37, when the athleticism had all but vanished, he could still do that. Because what he had built over 20 years wasn't an athletic game. It was a craftsman's game, one built on footwork and angles and an understanding of the game so deep that it didn't care what his body could or couldn't do anymore. The first version of Kobe used the body, used the athleticism. The second version used everything else. And the second version was just as dangerous. Here's what I see all the time, and it's the thing that this episode is really about. People who are great at something become loyal to it long after it stops serving them. The business model that worked in year 2, the leadership style that got the result when the team was smaller, the approach that built the very first version of what you have and is now quietly the ceiling that's keeping you from building the next one. They call it consistency, and sometimes it actually is. But sometimes it's just fear of becoming something new. Fear that the next version won't be as good as the one you know. Fear that letting go of what worked means admitting that it isn't working anymore. Kobe didn't have that fear, or if he did not let it make the call. At 18, he was already building the version of himself that he wouldn't need until 35. And when that version arrived, he studied the player who had made the transition the best and learned everything that he could from him. And when the final game came, he scored 60 points because the second version was ready. You can either live stale past the expiration date, or you can grow. Most people choose to live past it because growing requires admitting that something has changed, that what got you here won't get you there, that the next version is going to require you to become someone you are not yet. So what version of yourself are you in right now? If you had to name it, how would you describe it? Is the approach that you're using one that's actually right for where you're trying to go? Or is it one that's worked before, that you've gotten comfortable with, that you're still using because it's familiar? Even though something in you knows it's time for something new. Because the time to build the next version is while the current one is still working. Kobe took tap lessons at 18, not because he needed them at 18, but because he understood that versions don't last forever. And the best time to prepare for the next one is before the current one expires. So what's your tap lesson? What are you building now that you won't need until later? What does the next version of you look like? And are you actually working on it? Because if you're waiting for the expiration date to arrive before you start building, you're going to spend a season trying to figure out what changed instead of being ready for what's next. Don't live past the expiration date. Build the next version. At 37, Kobe scored 60 points in his last game because he had become someone new. Someone that didn't need the first version anymore. Someone he had been building quietly since he was 18 with tap shoes and a refusal to stay the same. Every version of you has an expiration date. The one you're in right now will expire. And the only question that matters is whether you'll be the one who decides what comes next or whether you'll wait until the current version runs out and then scramble to figure out who you're supposed to be now. You can either live past the expiration date stale or you can grow. Which one are you choosing? Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.